The Democratic Party introduced vice presidential candidate Tim Walz to the nation as a Midwestern dad and a football coach. But the Minnesota governor is also a world traveler with a ton of experience in China. Walz used to talk about it all the time back when he first ran for Congress in 2006.
And by starting cooperations with an incredibly important area of the world with China and taking hundreds and hundreds of students to learn that too, I think that gives me a unique perspective that is a lot more Minnesota and a lot less Washington.
In fact, during his time in Congress, Walz occasionally exaggerated how many times he'd been to China.
One of the things we've been focusing on, and I lived in China, and as I said, I've been there about 30 times.
We investigated and found that it's more like 15 times. But still, that's a lot. His experience in China sets him apart from most people who've run for the highest offices in the US. But now that Walz is running for vice president, he barely mentions China. Here are some key points about his time there. Walz lived in China for about a year, starting in 1989, when he was a 25-year-old teacher. He lived in Foshan and said he traveled across the country, thousands of miles to Tiananmen Square and Tibet. He returned to Nebraska to teach social studies, and he started arranging summer trips to take students with him to China. We tracked down video of one of these trips. You can see him hiking the Great Wall and smiling after he plucks meat from a snail shell. Students and teachers who knew him said he spoke at least proficient Mandarin back then. Walz kept running these summer trips when he moved to Minnesota in 1996, and his work on China continued when he got to Congress. And he's been critical of China. He's advocated for democracy and co-sponsored a bill aimed at protecting civil rights in Hong Kong. As vice president, Walz would have a way bigger foreign policy role than he does as governor. His expertise there would seem to be an asset. So why isn't he talking about it? Maybe because Republicans have tried to turn his time there into a political liability.
It's very possible that China would be grooming an up-and-coming rising star in the political process to try to have a foothold in our government.
But Walz was hardly a rising political star when he made all those trips there. He was a small-town history teacher. So the question is it an asset or a liability for a vice presidential candidate to have deep experience in China?